Good afternoon. You're watching AB Live, a brand new news-based chat show in which we discuss topics ranging from news, business, politics, and so much more. On today's episode, we are discussing the halal food industry. Well, Malaysia is the #1 Islamic economy in the world, but UAE isn't far behind. In fact, Dubai has the vision of being the center of the Islamic economy. With a Muslim population of 1.8 billion globally, there definitely is tremendous scope in this industry. And for this discussion in the studios right now, we have Dr. Halal Ameri from the IHAF, and we have Nabil Sharif from Serendipity Tailormade. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
welcome.
very much. Thank you.
Right, so Dr. Rehab, let me start with you. What exactly is IHAF and what does it do?
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk about a very interesting topic. IHAF, which is IHAF, it's an international halal and accreditation forum, which is basically an international organization responsible for harmonizing the practices and the procedure related to accreditation bodies around the world who are giving a certification to certification bodies dealing with halal.
All right.
And when we are talking about those bodies, it could be a certification body giving for products, or it could be for a system or for the whole supply chain.
All right, great. So now coming to you, Serendipity Tailormade would be the parent company, but there's also Rihala. So correct me if I'm wrong, is it like the Expedia but for the halal industry?
Absolutely, yes. And Serendipity started around 7 years ago. 10 years ago from today, there wasn't really a halal-friendly travel terminology. It didn't really exist. And today, 10 years on, the market has grown so much. And Serendipity, being a very offline tailor-made proposition, is now moving towards the Rihala brand, which is in effect servicing the millennials of Muslim travelers.
Right, so essentially, are you a startup? Is Rihala a startup?
So, yeah, Rihala would be, and Rihala has got a lot of exciting plans going forward. We see it as the global brand for us. We have so much interesting technology behind it, from user-generated content, which links into social feeds and really inspires travelers, not from us, but from their own peers.
All right, so before we actually get on with the business of halal and the scope that the industry has, so can you just explain to our viewers about what exactly halal really means and what does the term actually curtail?
Actually, this is a very tricky question because usually when we are talking about halal, or when we say halal, people, they are thinking that it's only related to food. Actually, halal, it's a set of requirements which needed to be fulfilled to satisfy special consumers,
right.
a Muslim consumer, and it can start from food and beverage and going to travel and entertainment industry. And I'm really happy to have Mr. Nabil with us to talk about his experience from entertainment and travel industry. It is more like a lifestyle. It can go to finance, financial halal finance.
Right.
It can go to a product that we are using in a daily life, like cosmetics, pharmaceutical products. So it's basically a set of requirements, and those requirements, some elements of those requirements, it needed to be in a framework of Sharia or Islamic requirement to satisfy special needs, like when we are talking about kosher or vegans, or so it is a set of requirements.
Right, so you're saying there is a framework, a guideline, a set of requirements, but this is not really all in writing. And isn't that one of the major problems that we have with the halal industry? That is, there is no uniform certification.
No, actually, I think this was the practice before. Halal industry, it was there since long time ago, but similar to any industry, when it comes to let's say to go into the path of growing, it brings the attention of the users, consumers, regulators. Those will have the beneficiaries, let's say.
Right.
So generally speaking, there was like a scattered practice. There was a fragmented let's say, way of dealing with halal. And now the world realized, and thanks for UAE government, which took initiatives to try to harmonize and gather all these practices to come up with a unified framework.
Right. Okay. So now let me come to you, Nabil. So when you started back in 2012, you mentioned.
Yeah.
So at that time, obviously, there was no clear framework, there was no clear guideline or definition per se.
Yeah.
So for you, was this an industry with a lot of opportunities, or is it a risk you took?
No, we did see the opportunities. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gone down the road. We did our thankfully, we did our due diligence. But just touching on what Dr. Rehab said, is that even today, we don't have a definitive definition for halal travel. Our definition is a little bit more middle of the ground, so we're sort of center right. Whereas from the standardization perspective, it's obviously certain elements of conservatism coming in. So the definitions don't. The problem isn't only with halal travel. It can be with food. It can be with cosmetics. It can be with a whole range of halal industries. But where we are today, I think we're in a much better position, and I think that's because of the way that stakeholders in our industry, specifically hotels, local ground excursions, attractions, have made themselves accessible to Muslim travel. And I think accessibility is the key.
Right, so I'm sure an evolution has happened over the years when it comes to the definition of halal, like you mentioned. But what would you say has been one of the biggest achievements when it comes to halal travel over the last few years?
I think exposure. I think the fact that halal travel now in 2019 is so much better known than it was 10 years ago. You've got hotels that are able to provide real good information on halal preparation, not only from the food where it's sourced, but also the preparation of them. How are their staff trained?
Right.
And Dr. Rehab mentioned it's not just about food. Privacy is another big part of what we work with in our framework of halal travel. Female travelers in particular, they want to be able to enjoy their holiday. They don't want to be limited on their holiday. Otherwise, for them, it's not a worthwhile purchase.
Right.
So, from our perspective, we want to provide access, and working with the trade has been such an amazing journey over the last 7 years, because you've got brands like the Six Senses, the Banyan Trees, major brands within the hospitality industry who are opening themselves up to a very, very lucrative market.
All right, great. So I agree with you that the market is definitely lucrative, but you mentioned certain brands here that do provide and cater to the halal demands right now, but the supply still overpowers the demand. And I'm not sure if you agree right now, there is an over demand and not as much supply. So how is it that this issue can be tackled, Doctor?
I think just to add on Mr. Nabil what he said, actually the regulators and those who work in standardization, they give an attention to coming up with the new standards when it comes to halal tourism. Actually, and there is a kind of debate whether call it halal or Islamic requirement, because usually halal, it turns to be linked to food and something that we consume. But when it comes to Islamic requirement, it's different. So there is a standard, a UAE standard, which has been finalized, and now it has been taken to the next level to become maybe GCC standard or international standard related to tourism, halal tourism.
Okay.
And it gives the requirement for the hotels, as you said, premises, dry hotels, as they call it.
Yeah.
It could be the whole premises or certain floors.
Okay.
Family-oriented hotels. Now we can see, based on the agreements, like one-to-one agreements between UAE and some of the countries, when it comes to Thailand and some of the Asian countries, they have like in certain brands, Six Senses, Four Seasons, they have the Qibla, which is the direction of a prayer in all hotels. So it is more than just requirements for food and a privilege. It's a lifestyle.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so just on those lines, I just want to branch out there. So you're talking about halal, which is, again, like we discussed earlier, it's also ethical. So the whole idea and the concept of halal has a lot to do with being ethical, being healthy in a lot of ways. So do you think this could also branch out not just to the Muslim customers, but also a wider industry? Do you see a scope there?
Yeah, I mean, from the travel perspective, I think it's important to realize that international brands don't want to label themselves as just halal friendly. You know, their customers come from all over the world.
Yeah.
And I'll return to the word accessible. I think major brands have to be accessible. Take Nike, for example. You know, the modest fashion industry has boomed. And those brands that have embraced modest fashion haven't necessarily called it halal fashion or Muslim fashion. They called it modest fashion.
Correct.
And now you're getting the likes of major sports brand coming in with Nike hijabs, for example, because they're making their product accessible.
Absolutely.
So whilst the terminology of halal is very much a buzzword and very much, you know, the essence of it, brands have to be accessible to whichever customer that they want to target.
Right. Absolutely. And also to add on this, if we look back to the industry, now I will give you an example, a real example from Australia and New Zealand. When it comes to, when they looked into to which extent application of the halal and implementation of halal requirement, it will be visible or not for them. Now for all products related to meat and poultry exported from and into New Zealand and Australia, they are following the halal requirement.
Okay.
So there is no non-halal requirement for Australia and New Zealand. They all follow the halal requirement because they found it is much feasible and less costly. Instead of opening two lines and then manufacture one, it's not halal and one is halal.
Right. So everything is halal.
So everything is halal. The only difference is that if they wanted to those products to enter to the Muslims country, they are using the halal marks.
Right.
While for the other non-Muslim country, it will be optional.
Right.
But the whole supply chain, it is halal.
Right, but doctor, right now I really need to ask you. So now you're talking about marks again. The marks are not standardized marks. So isn't there a question of trust coming into play now? Because we've seen a lot of halal food scandals happening in a number of countries in the past few years. So right now, isn't trust one of the major challenges that the consumers of halal or the people who demand halal products would probably have in their mind?
I think the consumer at the end, we are consumers. We like to have a mark. Like if you're going to buy a bag, you look to the mark, and the mark will give you a trust. Now you don't go back and to check to which extent this bag has been manufactured, because the branding has been done enough to give you that trust for the mark. So what we are doing now, that we wanted to make sure that we have a cohesive system and a very strong system, starting from a clear requirement, standardization, harmonization of the thoughts, of the practices, policies and procedures, accepting differences, because if we are talking about Malaysia requirement could be different than UAE requirement, could be different than other country requirement. That's why they call it a scheme. So we wanted to come up into the area where we have a common a ground, and then appreciating and acknowledging those differences. Now at the end, as a consumers, when it comes to them, to the market, on the shelf, they wanted to see this mark. Right. So all the effort is to try to make sure that we are branding the halal in the outcome, which is a simple product from this processes, which is a mark.
It's like an ISO mark that we have for the other brands.
Absolutely.
All right. So Nabil, I'm just trying to bring you in here. So has trust been an issue for you? Because I know you have direct or a more direct interaction with the consumers, with the travelers, with the people who are availing your services.
Yeah, and trust is a really big part of any Muslim brand that goes out there, or non-Muslim brand that decides to interact with Muslim consumers, because it's such an integral part of what we do. I mean, you were touching on the meat distribution from Australia and New Zealand. A lot of that comes into the UK, but we have no way of identifying it. So, like you said, an ISO mark adds that trust because it's an international recognition. From the travel industry perspective, it's very important for accommodation providers or whoever it is within the industry to build those bridges. And for us, we go that extra step to make sure that the supply chain is also looked at.
Yeah.
So whether it's the supply that's coming through to that particular hotel, the training of their staff, separation of utensils, etc.
Yes, yeah.
You know, this is a very small part of what happens when it comes to food, but there's also the wider perspective too.
Right, so now I need to ask you, how much do you think the global and regional halal economy or industry is worth? And right now I'm using the terms Islamic economy and halal industry interchangeably. I'm not sure if I can do that.
Yeah.
But in that perspective, how much is it worth?
It's increasing and growing tremendously. It has been expected that by 2023, the global halal market will value about 2.6 trillion US dollar.
Okay.
And this also in line with the increase of Muslim populations. It has been expected about 7% increase in Muslim population from the total global population. And also we have to acknowledge that, as I said, it's not related to Muslims. Halal, it's a global market. It's a great opportunity for investors. People are traveling from all over the world. Actually, the main stakeholders and investors who are really interested in halal industry are coming from Eastern and Western, Far East and Westernized country.
Right.
So it is not, let's say, labeled for Muslims country or Muslim communities.
It's good business.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
good
It's a business.
Yeah, I mean, you can say that. You've got first-hand experience there. But do you think it is growing at a pace that it should be growing, or it is growing at a pace of the demand, considering the Muslim population is growing in a faster pace than the industry itself is growing?
It can be. I would say that you've got to look at it in context. You know, we've got the estimated Muslim population by 2030 is going to be 2.2 billion, up from 1.8 at the moment. That's a huge amount of people, but 60% of those, or 59% of those, are going to be in Asia Pac. About 3.2% are going to be in Western Europe. So when you look at the disposable income, who's your target market?
Yeah.
Is it 5% of Asia Pac, or is it potentially 90% of your Western European, North American clients? So when it comes to market value and looking at those opportunities, I think there is a huge amount of opportunity for whether it's travel or other brands to look at different niches, look at different focuses, look at different regions, and really provide the supply to those particular areas to meet those demands.
So can I ask you, who exactly is your target market right now for Hala and Serendipity then?
Well, Serendipity is very much aimed at the sort of person that travels maybe 2 or 3 times a year. They don't have the time to organize their own travel, so they want somebody that has the expertise, and they just want to get it done. Hala is very much aimed at the millennial Muslim traveller. One of the fastest growing sectors of population globally. They're very tech savvy, obviously very engaged with social media, and really like to do a lot of their own research themselves, whether it's on a train, going home. 70% of research is done on mobile now for travel. So, we have to be able to respond to those demands, and being able to pick their own flights, accommodation, transfers, excursions, on their way home from work. It saves a lot of time, and it means that they have access to that at the tips of their fingers.
Right, and now Dubai obviously wants to be in the center of this entire Islamic economy boom that's happening. How do you think that can be achieved?
Actually, we have to acknowledge the effort that has been done by the government of UAE and as well as from Dubai. Since the announcement for this initiative in 2013 to have UAE and mainly Dubai the capital of the Islamic economy, and with initiatives between Emirate Authority for Standardization and Metrology ISMA as well as Dubai Islamic Economy Development Center of creating IHAF, it was one of the biggest achievements to the country to create a platform which will harmonize all the practices around the world, not only in UAE, not only in Dubai, but around the world. Now we have to say that with the great effort that happened during the establishment of IHAF, that we have up to 35 members, some of them from the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Countries,
Okay.
and the rest are from different non-Muslim countries.
So you have 33 member nations?
35.
35, okay.
And we are aiming to reach up to 50 by the end of 2019.
Oh, wow.
And a great, efforts between all these members from US, from UK, from Italy, Spain, because they are really acknowledge the importance of this industry, and we are working together to come up with the best framework to improve and empower halal industry.
Right, so Doctor, I'm just trying to understand how exactly you would be working. So there's the travel company
Yes.
here, we have Halal and Serendipity, Tailormade. So how exactly would you be working with a company and an online agency based in the UK then?
Basically, when it comes to Halal International Halal Accreditation Forum, we are the higher umbrella. So we don't have a direct contact with the industry, but we are the one who are organizing and putting the framework, policy procedures that to ensure that the whole process, when it comes to you, will be transparent.
Yep.
Governance, to try to establish a fair competitive market for you.
Yeah.
So we are working with a standardization body to ensure that we have a common understanding and common agreement on one halal standard. We are working with accreditation body who are accredit the certifier. And those certifiers, they have to be well monitored to ensure that they are providing a service to you to allow you to be reputable in the market. Because the problem is the bad competition. You have maybe suffered from lower quality competitors. So we are trying to build that environment to make sure that there is a fair competition according to a set of requirements, clear and transparent.
And do you think it's from a regional level, it's still going to be micromanaged from a regional level?
It is not actually a regional level. We are talking about international level. So, like anything, it needed to start by someone somewhere. So UAE took the initiatives and now took the initiatives to build and to foster this organization. However, it is an international independent organization which has regular meetings. We are talking about 35 members from representing biggest industry in the world, and we are talking also about UAE halal standard, which is now has been acknowledged by more than 50 countries in the world.
Correct. So basically you are a regulatory body, but I completely get your question. When it comes to regulation, there's a whole idea of, the suppression that comes along with the regulation. So that could be one of the fears that independent investors, companies, startups, etc. can have. But right now, just unfortunately, we're running short of time, but I just need to leave you with one question about the scope of the industry and where it could be headed towards. And right now, nothing can go without the backing of technology.
Yes.
So what is the main role that technology and blockchain specifically can play?
Yeah.
Technology in the travel industry has been such an integral part of its growth. Today, online travel agencies and online booking portals are probably the first port of call for most travelers. I think the way that travel is going, and specifically technology in travel, is really interesting. We've obviously have our user-generated content level, which is really integrated and it's very interactive with our consumers. Could we go down the AI route and look at artificial intelligence on maybe not guessing, but education, estimating where somebody will go next based on their previous travel trends? I don't see that being too difficult to do. Can cryptocurrency come into play? Of course it can, because it is technically going to be a global currency, and that's always good when you're crossing borders.
Well, that's a whole conversation.
That's a whole different conversation. I'm not going to get into that too much. But even going into augmented reality and virtual reality, even, do you want to experience where you're going before you actually go there to make sure you've got the right place? There are certain brands, who have established that and trialing that. Is that relative to the halal travel market? I think it could be, because you could literally look around your room, you could see how private it is, and think, that's the place I want to go.
Adding on this, it is a very important topic when it comes to standardization and the requirements, because you are talking about the whole supply chain. So every year we have a halal global platform in which we are discussing all the new technology and emerging technology in the halal industry. And one of those topics, which is a very hot topic, it's about blockchain and artificial intelligence and how we can use technology to leverage the market when it comes to slaughterhouses, when it comes to ensuring that this product, it's really halal by using the technology. Traceability of the product, traceability of the material. Okay, so it's very, very, very important hot topics, and this is how we are updating our standard to, to align with the speed of the market and emerging technology.
Absolutely, I think next conversation should just be about the role of technology and, of course, cryptocurrencies in the whole halal trade. But thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for those valuable insights. We've definitely learned a lot from this session today, and thank you for watching AB Live. We will be back again next Tuesday.